G'day everyone, this is Iynka here. Welcome to Investor Journeys, where we chat with everyday Aussies and seasoned investors about their property journeys, the wins, the stuff ups, and everything in between. Whether they've got one property or a whole portfolio, we dive into how they did it, what they've learned, and what their journey's been like so far. No fluff, just real stories from real people. So let's get stuck in. G'day everyone, welcome to the IJ podcast. Today I've got a very special guest, and this guest is actually someone we haven't worked with, so I'm really excited to talk to him about his journey through property. I've got an insight about some of his portfolio, and it's going to be something that I think everyone will get a lot out of because they do have a number of properties there where I'm sure they can share their story. So welcome, Sasi, to the podcast. Really happy to have you on, mate, and thanks for sharing your time today.
Thank you, Iynka. Yeah, awesome to finally jump on your podcast and excited to have a chat with you, man. It's been great to see all the work you've been doing the last couple of years to get into the property space, and keen to have a chat and share my story.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it because look, I know you quite well, and I've said this to my last guest. This common theme around here is that I know a lot of my guests from New Zealand, and you're no exception. We used to play badminton in Auckland, and we obviously knew each other back then, and we'll obviously get into it. But you've made the shift over to Australia as well. Something about you guys I didn't really know about is your journey through property, and what you've told me just off the record there was very, very interesting. So I'm really excited to hear all about it, mate. But moving on to your property journey, I suppose your background is you grew up in Auckland, and do you want to just tell me a bit about how you guys grew up and your relationship with money, investing, and that kind of thing? Was that ever spoken about at the dinner table?
That's a good question. Like, look, in terms of that sort of specific topic around money, it was never something that we'd huddle around a table and have a chat about. We always knew that money was an important part of us growing up, but it wasn't something that we particularly had a lot of focus on in our family conversations. And if I'm being quite frank, it was probably a bit of a taboo subject as well. We didn't really bring up whether we want to be spending money on expensive things or buying expensive things, but it was one of those areas where we knew that our parents had to make a lot of sacrifices, I think, in terms of being just a normal sort of Sri Lankan and immigrant household, my parents had to move country twice, like two sort of big immigrations in their lifetime. And I think, myself and my sister were very appreciative and very just in awe of the sacrifices they've had to make, for us to have a life in New Zealand and a very, happy life in New Zealand. You have always fond memories in New Zealand as well. It's a great place, obviously, as you know. But yeah, look, in terms of our family upbringing and how we all sort of started moving into New Zealand, money was never really a talking point per se. My parents have had to migrate twice in their life. They moved from Sri Lanka to Africa. We spent, 10 years there. And then from Africa, moved halfway around the world to New Zealand and set up roots there. And, for them to do that twice in their life where they had to basically leave everything behind, a lot of things got, they had to start from scratch in both those cases and had to build up once again both themselves and a young family. So I think that part of it was always acknowledged and appreciated in our family. From a money perspective, it was something that we never really talked about. We knew that there were times where it was pretty tough, and our parents had to make a lot of sacrifices to get us into the right schools and also encourage us to go chase studies at university and all that sort of stuff. So from a upbringing perspective, it was very sort of stock standard. You go in and you go into your high school, you graduate from high school, go into university, you become one of the like a doctor or an engineer, and then from there you go into full-time work, and that's all we knew. And to be honest, we saw our parents do it, and they were happy doing it to some degree, and it's something that we just that's all we knew at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very similar, mate. I also grew up. I was born over in Africa, and we moved over from Africa as well. So I can understand. When did you move over to Auckland?
Auckland, we moved there in 1996. So yeah, I was born in Nigeria. I think you're born in Nigeria as well. Oh, I'm mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, so I moved to Auckland in 1996. And yeah, it was a great time. We had a great bunch of family friends. We all stayed in flats together and all hung out. So it was very fond memories, being back in New Zealand for sure.
Yeah, it was a good time. I remember driving up to Auckland around the 90s. We used to visit my cousin. Shout out to Vinod.
Yeah.
And saw a lot of my family out there up in Auckland when I was growing up in Palmy, so it's much smaller place. But I'm sure New Zealand would have been quite a different cultural shift for your family as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and and probably for myself. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I couldn't speak a word of English when I moved to New Zealand. So it was very much a cultural shift. Obviously, the demographic changed significantly as well, and we all, as a family unit, I think we all had to adjust to that new way of living and the place that we were in. And New Zealand was just such a beautiful place and fantastic people. We were very thankful that the community we went into was very welcoming, and I think that made things just that little bit easier for us. But I think, absolutely, there were definitely some challenges along the way. But as you can imagine, probably immigration, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I should shout out to Pradeepan as well, mate. Sorry. We used to catch up with Pradesh and his family a lot too. So
Yep.
good time. So then you're growing up in New Zealand, and I should obviously mention, I know your wife very well as well, Anu, and you guys met quite early on in Auckland, and then do you want to tell me about your shift together through to Australia and that kind of period?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I met my wife a long time ago. So we've been together for 20 plus years. So I invested long term. But yeah, look, I think in terms of like our shift to Australia, we've been here for about 10 years now, I think. 2015, yeah, 10 years here in Sydney. So my wife's got a big family here in Sydney, and it was always a place that drew us in every time we'd visit or go for, vacations and things. And we love the sort of busy, sort of metropolitan type city. Not so much the house prices, but yeah, the busy sort of metropolitan cities. And yeah, we loved the vibe as soon as we came into Sydney, and we settled in into a unit we were renting in initially, and then pretty much moved over with our jobs and everything. So it was pretty smooth from that perspective compared to a large family migration from Africa to New Zealand. So I think it was definitely much more less stress. But yeah, we were pretty happy with coming into Australia. It opened up opportunities for myself and Anu as well, career-wise, to advance in our careers and move up in what we're doing. So yeah, very, very fortunate for that.
Yeah, I remember. So you moved in 2015 because me and Urvi, my wife, we moved to Sydney, for a period of time, a couple of years in 2016 and 17. So that I didn't realize that was just after you moved. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, quite recent. We used to play a lot of badminton together in Sydney
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Not as quick as I used to be, but yeah, still give it a good crack.
Goes for all of us, mate. So tell me now. You've shipped it over to Sydney. You're likely going to start a family. So what's your thoughts, because you've gone through a background where you haven't really talked about money or investing, which is obviously very common in our culture. And
Yep.
hopefully, I think as time goes on, things will change in that respect. But yeah, what's going through the conversations at Sasi and Anu's household there about it?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think we always knew that we needed to do something. And I think the hardest part was knowing A, what to do, and like B, who to sort of trust with doing it for us or helping us with it. And I think that's why our plans got stagnated for quite a long time, like probably a couple of years since we moved into Sydney. We were enjoying our time and enjoying our work and jobs. And I think part of it was just really trying to find that first avenue to go down with investing, and whether that was property or stocks or whatever else is out there. And eventually we sort of settled on property, and I started reading a lot more about it. Again, probably still not taking action really at that point. It was just sort of testing the waters and seeing what it was all about. What is this big property investment, situation that every single Australian seems to be really into.
The religion.
Yeah, it is, yeah, pretty much. And yeah, we sort of started. I started primarily taking that role to sort of understand a lot more about it. And it was probably only until our first daughter was born that the light bulb kind of went off in our minds that we needed to really take action. Like we needed to really get going and start thinking about the future for our family and what that meant, looking at what it could mean for our retirement, what it could mean for our future kids, situation down the line in 20 plus years from now when they're looking to maybe get into property or purchase their own place or whatever it is that they wanted to do, and how best we could try and support that with building up our wealth and the wealth creation strategy as we go through that. So I think that was where, yeah, that light bulb really went off. And, after Kiara was born, our first daughter, the snowball began. I think we really wanted to take action and started looking at different agencies, very similar to what you may be doing as well, to help support us in that role. And I think we were looking for somebody that would almost be a partner along our journey as well, not somebody that was going to be transactional, I guess, in the way that we're looking at investing. So somebody that would stick by us, keep us accountable as well. It's almost like having a personal trainer for like your property journey. They'll keep you accountable, keep you honest with your goals, keep you focused as well on your strategy approach. And I think that was one of the biggest things we're looking for. And then that started to open up Pandora's box, because if you go and search for property advisors or agencies on Google in Australia, there's thousands. So I think this is where we had to now be very careful as to how we progress from there, and choose the right people to work with.
Yeah, I think, this was about 7 years ago. So, even since then, there's been a massive shift in the amount of agencies out there, and the good, bad, and the ugly. And obviously being, your first property, you want to make sure that you make the right decisions. And, compounded with that, you're living in Sydney, where house prices are also extremely expensive. So, it's a very brave decision, obviously, to be able to invest your money whilst you're living in the most expensive. And I think that's amazing and fantastic. But you've obviously got a good sort of ground in terms of your jobs and a good base there. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your first property then and what you went through on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of our first property, like naturally, as we were starting a family, we were looking to buy our own place. So I think we were looking at, townhomes and apartments and homes here in Sydney and different areas. We ended up buying our first property here for us to live in, our principal base here in Wentworth Point, which is a nice little 2-bedroom, 2-car park, 2-bathroom place with a nice study nook as well. So good amount of space for us to grow a small family in. And then that's where we were also looking to see what we could do investment-wise. So having gone through that, I guess that's sort of mental load of going through loan contracts and property negotiations and all that sort of stuff by ourselves. We were looking at, okay, how do we make this work for investing for the future, really? So yeah, once our daughter was born, we reached out to an agency called the Property Mentors based in Melbourne, headed up by Luke Harris. So they were among some of the first agencies we were talking with. There was probably about 3 or 4 others that we'd sort of, I guess, shortlisted down to having a chat with. And after having a chat with all of them, again, we took a bit of a break to sort of digest everything and really understand what was going to be we'll be getting into. And it was probably about 3 or 4 months after that we re-engaged with the Property Mentors and Luke Harris and his team, and really got going on getting our first property. Investment property in Queensland. So we got our first property in 2018, sort of just after our daughter was born, that we got our first investment property. And obviously there was a big kind of mountain to climb, I think, just to understand even what we were getting ourselves into at that point, and really making sure that we had all the ducks in a row. We were working with the right people, forming the right team around us. I think that was one of the biggest learnings we had with working with TPM. And a couple of different things, like making sure you had the right financial readiness, you had the right educational readiness. You also had the right emotional readiness. I think as a property investor, a lot of the emotion kind of has to be taken out of the equation, and you really do have to focus on the actual vital signs of a property and what it's going to bring to your portfolio. So that sort of mindset, well, that sort of shift in mindset was huge. Like just to make sure we could do all of those things and raise a small family. So I think that was absolutely the biggest mountain to climb.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point for the listeners because a lot of people that I speak to who have invested in property, I'd say the majority they haven't used a buyer's agent. That might be partly because sometimes they see the cost and think, okay, it's worthwhile myself doing it on my own. But quite often also they're not even aware of that service that is out there. And I think you going through a buyer's agency to start the process. And all those things you talked about, the emotional readiness, the financial readiness, a lot of people don't get that information when they do it on their own to start with, right? Like they don't, there's so much more to just going on realestate.com and buying a property. And I think you would have found that through your journey on that first property rather than doing it on your own. And I think that would have opened up a whole lot of, I suppose, information of what you need to prepare in order to get into property investment. And I think, it's a really good point because, like I said, there's so many people out there spending hundreds of thousands of dollars who want to do it on their own to save a buck. But just the amount of diverse type of information that you need to understand, not just the location, is so crucial to getting that portfolio right. And that first property is probably one of the most important parts of your portfolio if you want to expand and build a larger portfolio, which eventually gets you to that freedom. So that's really good to understand. So you bought that one in Queensland,
Yep.
and then so you bought that first one, and that's with that one settled. Was there any issues with that first property at all, or went pretty smooth?
No, it was all pretty smooth. Like it was a 3-bedroom home in the Thornlands area, so southeast Queensland or southeast Brisbane, and beautiful property. It had a property manager on site as well, so somebody that knew the entire complex and knew the property inside and out. So we've never had any issues, touch wood, with that property. It's always been tenanted as well, so very, very low vacancy in the last 7 years. I think we've only changed tenants maybe once or twice in that time. So it's been, having a long-term tenant in there, which is fantastic. And in terms of that mindset shift that he sort of talked about, like we're very risk-averse type people, and I think getting into that first property was such a big mountain for us to climb mentally, that we had to make sure that everything was in the right order. We had the right lawyers involved and all that sort of stuff, looking at contracts and reviewing all the contract information and making sure we weren't making a mistake, really, because you are right, it is a huge financial commitment that you are taking with property, and it's not very easy to backpedal out of it once you sort of go down the road. So I think making sure that you've got the right team around you, that was probably the second sort of biggest part of having an agency, is that they have a really strong network of people that you can work with, and go and speak to them for yourselves and understand what they do and whether you want to be, having them on your team, like, great mortgage brokers, great property managers, great accountants, like those people that you're paying this extra money for to go and help you on this property journey, because they're doing this day in and day out. You just can't compete to try and do that on your own, because if you want to try and grow and scale, at some point you're going to need to build this team around you. You can probably do it with your first or second property and do it by yourself and manage. But if you're thinking about scaling and growing, you really do need to engage with the team and get others along the journey that value your goals and want to support you along the way. And I think that was one of the biggest shifts as well, was getting a right team around us to really go for it and accumulate that sort of portfolio that we've got to at this point. After that first property, I guess the first one's always the hardest, as they say in life, no matter what it is. I think property investing is no different. So after we got the first property, literally 12 months later, we got our second. So that was in Melbourne, in the Cranbourne area. Again, another 3-bedroom home in Cranbourne. I should say that the first property was, it was great. It was one that we're looking for lowering our sort of tax as well on our incomes, and same sort of strategy again with the second property to help lower tax. And that property now in Cranbourne, we got that in 2019, 2020. So around about 1 year apart. And after that, we were like, okay, let's take a break and we'll focus on growing this little family of ours. By that time, Anu was pregnant again with our second child, was born in 2020. And so we're sort of just making sure that we set the right foundations up at home first, and then we'll circle back to the property investing at a later date. But yeah, we'd gone kind of back to back, both with property and I guess with kids to some degree, quite soon. So I think it was enough for us at that point, and working with all the right people and having the team behind us to sort of say, hey, look, we'd like to take a bit of a pause. We'll be back. And they respected that, and I think that was one of the big things we could see with working those agencies, that they respected our boundaries. They never tried to push us into going all in. And they were willing to operate at our own pace, which I loved. So yeah, I was very, very happy with that. And that was our second property in Cranbourne.
Yes, and now you've got three properties altogether, including a PPR, and I think that's quite a good point about the mind shift in terms of the timing that needs to suit you. And I know TPM sort of fairly well, and they plan out with their clients, effective property plans, and it has to make sure that it coincides with life as well. And I think it's really important to understand what your and discuss what your life situation is, because that does affect how your portfolio will perform as well. If you're thinking of starting a family soon, you want to try and get in a few while you can, rather than just wait and then find you've got a family, then you're waiting another 4 or 5 years while the prices have gone up. So that's great. So you've got two. You've got now your 2 kids. Sounds like a very busy time. COVID probably hits just after that as well.
Yep.
And so what's the next steps for you guys?
Yeah, bingo. Look, COVID hit run about that time frame as well. We had the 2 properties that were okay. They were doing fine in terms of growth, especially in Queensland around COVID. It boomed really. We were very excited to see that property grow to where it is now, and even to some degree in Melbourne as well. There was some small growth there in Melbourne, and we were very excited to then re-engage again and go and look at opportunities in the market to see what was out there at the time. Conversations in WA were happening. There was also still some good opportunities in Queensland and Melbourne at that time, and we wanted to try and get a property that was within our sort of goals as well, around just accumulation and making sure we could get through the process rather painlessly from a borrowing capacity point of view as well. So we ended up actually going into Melbourne again for our third investment property, which is in Oak Park. So we loved that property as well. It was like a 3-story home that we bought into. Great sort of location, close proximity to the train station and into the city or into the airport. So a great sort of fundamental thing that we're looking for our investments. And actually, after that property had settled, we then went again in the same area, again for another apartment actually in that area. So we went for a 1-bedroom apartment in there, just again to accumulate the property. And we knew that the fundamentals of the area were there. And at that time, there was also movements in the Melbourne market where it kind of started going sideways. So that was one of those things that challenges us mentally, was just making sure that your goals are strong enough to help you through those tough times, because there's going to be periods of time where your property's not doing much, or if they're even going down in some cases, or stagnating or moving sideways. So being very mindful of why you're doing this, like why are you even putting in so much time and effort and money into the strategy, and having calls and meetings with different people to try and get this property across the line, and making sure you have the right goals set up in front of mind, when you're going through and doing this, because it's super, super important, because that's what you fall back on when times get tough, or when you're challenged in some way in your investing strategy. And some people may make like a irrational decision to pull the plug, or to pull out early, or to backpedal on what they're doing. And that was something that we did not want to do as much as we could. We understood that property was a long-term game. You invest for the long term. You seek the fundamentals in the property. As long as it performs well and you've got a great tenant in there, you've got a great property manager looking after the property, just leave it alone. Don't touch something that ain't broke. And invest for the long term, I think was some of the main strategies.
Yeah, I think that's sage advice. I think the listeners should go back and listen to that again, because property investment is not all sunshine and rainbows. It's you're going to have times in the cycle where where there'll be stagnation and might decline for a little bit. Otherwise everyone will be doing it. And the successful property investors do think of the 10 plus year horizon, and going through different cycles. The fact that you've got your property in Queensland, which is growing obviously, and then you've got your Melbourne properties, which are probably in a different cycle. Over long term, it all starts to balance out, and they call it regression to the mean, where you have different cycles of these properties. So property shouldn't be judged on the performance of 1 or 2 years. It needs to have the full cycle and to align with your goals as well. And I think that long term mindset is so important to be a successful property investor, and that's all the property investors that are successful that I know have held on to property for the long term. Short term growth is great, but it's not going to carry on forever, and there'll be another cycle that'll do that. And it's important to make sure your portfolio is balanced enough to go through that, which it sounds like your one is. So that's great. And so you've got these properties, and is there any more in the horizon for you guys?
Yeah, so look, over the horizon, we're looking to do one more in Queensland. So in northern Queensland, in the Airlie Beach, Canterville area, in the Whitsundays. So looking again at a 3-bedroom home to be built out there, and that'll probably be us for a little while as we take a break from it. So that's one of the exciting projects that I'm working on right now, is trying to get that one across the line. And again, that's going to be one of those properties that's oriented around one of our goals of having like a holiday home later on in life. I think that'll be one of the perfect ones for us to just have a getaway. Similar in New Zealand, you'd have batches in New Zealand, similar sort of situation that we'd like to set up for us in the future. Initially starting out as a rental property, and then further down in life, we might have that as our holiday home for the family. So I think that was one that we're really, really excited about. And it's sort of the first one we're going through kind of a official kind of building process as well. So we've got the land out there, and we're going to be doing the construction and design and all that sort of stuff. So different sort of challenges in that space compared to what we've had previously with our property investing. And I think we were obviously very mindful of the rising construction costs and all that sort of stuff coming into Australia, and that particular strategy and what we're going to be doing with it. But we're sort of confident around the numbers and the return we'd expect even in the first 12 to 24 months on that property. So we're pushing on and trying to get that one across the line this year.
So yeah, I mean that's really interesting. I talked to a lot of my clients about development and construction, and some of them need to understand the risks of it, but a lot of them want to get into it early. Whereas you guys have actually built a quite a large portfolio already, and you've got security there to be able to do these sort of things, and focus on the cash flow. It sounds like later down in your portfolio, and this is what we try and also educate our clients is you can, of course, you can go do development right from the get go. But there's a lot more risk involved, and with the things you've mentioned, especially these days, the risk might be too great for a lot of people. But you've obviously built that portfolio already, and now you're getting into that. So I'd love to get you on at some stage, mate, and understand how it all goes. Maybe in a few years when it's all finished. But so right now you've just got the land secured at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's right. So looking to build out the construction, and to your point, like if we had started with this property at the very beginning, I don't think we would have gone through with it, because there's so much more to the construction of a property than just standard sort of residential investment, where you have an agency or a buyer's agent helping you along the way. And to your point, like for those that are starting, like you'd want to try and keep it as simple as possible, like in terms of what sort of investment approach you're taking with the property, whether it's a new property or an established property. One of those two avenues is perfectly fine as long as the fundamentals are there. I think with the property, it's in a good growth area. It's got low vacancy. There's not too much in terms of expenses you have to cover. That's another thing as property investors or people that are looking to get into property. They think that the rent is going to cover off your mortgage when there's so many other expenses that come under owning a piece of property as well, whether it's maintenance or strata or different things that have to get fixed up in the property or council fees, all that sort of stuff also chip away at the return on the property. So I think keeping it very simple initially to start off with, and then as you build confidence in each of those areas, the financial, educational, and emotional, as you build confidence in those areas, you can look to try and grow at kind of your own pace, whether you want to go and get two properties or if you want to build up more equity in the first one to unlock you to get into more areas and more properties. I think that was one of the things was because we're so risk averse, we wanted to try and keep it as simple as possible, make sure we could get a good tenant in there, lock it down, and have somebody looking after the property excellent as well. So I think that was a really key part of our strategy, and it takes a little bit of time, obviously, to go through that process and go through those motions. But as we mentioned, we're making sure that we're investing for the long term and having that sort of delayed gratification. We don't want to go and pull the plug and cash out on all these properties and go and buy a Lamborghini or something. But I think that's one of the things as well that you have to realize is trying to have that delayed gratification. You're going to have people that you meet up at dinners or at coffees or at work or at family barbecues that talk about property and that they've gone and bought this house and all that sort of stuff, and all that is going to play a very significant weight on your mind, and you have to think about come back to your goals, as to why you're doing this. Why am I going through 3-4 properties and looking to grow this portfolio, and there's other people, moving into beautiful homes and things like this, or whatever the case might be, right? So I think making sure you've got the goals for your wealth creation really sound and clear in your mind, and having a great team around you that can support through that process. I think those sort of fundamentals are absolutely critical. And then from there, you have your team that can go as slow as you like or as quick as you like, and appreciate what's happening in your life. I think that's been the case for us as well. So yeah.
Fantastic. So now I've got a few final questions for you. So how many properties is that now?
So all including our principal place of residence, it'll be 5, and then with the property we're building out in Queensland, that'll be the 6th one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a bit hard to value, I suppose, that one at the moment. But current portfolio worth, how much is that?
Yeah, current portfolio worth, you're probably looking around the 4 million mark. So once the one in Cannon Vale is done, it'll be around 4.5, I would say, if not more. That's just based off the construction costs, really. And then once the property goes to the market, you get a good sense of it. But portfolio is around the 4.5 million. When I go back and think about the journey we've taken to get to where we are, it's quite exciting. I think to have to share that story and to see where things have gone in our journey, and we've had some challenges along the way, and I think that's where it comes back to making sure you have a really supportive team on that journey, because almost every property purchase, you're going to have this thing in the back of your mind going, oh, is this the right decision, or is this the right way to go? And as soon as you have to pop your signature onto a loan contract or onto the contract of sale for the property, there's always that thing in the back of your mind going, okay, am I doing the right thing here? So I think making sure you've got the right team behind you, that you've gone and done all the the checks across the property, and you're happy with the strategy it's going to bring to your portfolio, super important.
Absolutely. So I think you were mentioning about that 1.5 mil of equity that you've got at the moment. One thing I actually want to ask you is, and sorry, I should say that is 4.5 mil worth of property is nothing to laugh at. I mean, that is a significant portfolio in the average person's in portfolio in Australia. So congratulations, guys. You guys have, you talk about goals a lot here and talking about the long term, and there's some really, really key fundamental points that you're making, because like I said, the ones that build the large portfolios, the ones that get to their goals, there's going to be adversity along the way. There's going to be downturns along the way. There'll be cash flow issues along the way too. Nothing will go 100% perfect, but it's those things that you overcome to become a very successful property investor, and you guys are well on your way. And so congratulations to both you and Anu. And I think your kids are set up, really, really well as well moving forward. And I think that speaks to your team as well. So one thing I do want to ask though is, you're currently still in your apartment. Do you think you'll look to upgrade your apartment at some stage in Sydney and live in Sydney and, build your, or just stay in your home? And secondly, does that involve selling any properties?
Yeah, look, in terms of where we are right now, that's probably the next kind of big goal for us. Once we get through a property in Queensland, we'll have to look at how we can upsize where we are right now, because two small kids are growing very, very quickly, as you can imagine, and space is a rare commodity in our place. So I think one of the things we'll have to look at is whether we do have to sell a property or two to release some borrowing capacity for us to move into a bigger place. The other avenue is whether we go and rent in a bigger place and continue with the investment journey. So that's one other thing that I wish we'd probably done a lot sooner was probably doing the rent vesting sort of strategy a lot earlier, way before even having kids. I think that would be one thing I'd probably go back and change. But our circumstances are a little bit different from that type of audience where they can do that. Where for us, we're looking to try and make sure we got stability for our kids and get them into the right areas for schools and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's a little bit more prioritized towards the family to make sure we can get a stable sort of home situation, and whether that means we have to sell a property or two, that then so be it. Like I think that's part of the whole objective of setting up the goals, is making sure that where those points are that you pull the trigger or you go and make a sale on a property and release some of that equity, or increase your borrowing capacity by a new job, whatever the case might be. Making sure what are those ripcord kind of moments that you got to sell. Let's sell this property and try and get into a bigger place for ourselves. So I think that's something that will definitely be on the horizon, I think, for us the next couple of years for sure, as we look to try and get into a place here in Sydney. We like to stay in Sydney, but as you know, it's as you mentioned, one of the most expensive cities to live in the world. And look, we're staying true to what we like to do and where we like to live and all that sort of stuff. And our kids love it here, and we're keen to stick with it and push on.
Fantastic. Well, look, you guys have done some amazing work over the last sort of 7 years or so. And, you've set yourself up, and like you said, some things take priority, like potentially your upgrade of your home, but you've set yourself up for that. And you have to look at the bigger picture. So, wish you all the best with all of that. And, like I said, I'd love to get you on, mate, like especially with the construction that you're going to go through and see what your next steps is in a couple of years or so. I'd love to hear part 2 of your story. But thanks, mate, for coming on. And, you guys have done, like I said, sensational. So, really appreciate you being quite open about your journey, because like I said, I know you guys pretty well, and I had no idea about what you guys had done. And but like at the end of the day, I appreciate it because the purpose is to really get our listeners to think about some of the things you may have done differently, but the mindset is the most important thing out of all of this, I think, because you guys have had that sort of different cycles in your portfolio, and it's really sticking to what you are trying to achieve for the long term. So well done, mate. And like I said, we'll get you on and hear more about your story. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Iynka. Yeah, always happy to jump on and have a chat. And for sure, I'll definitely connect with you again once we get into that property, and we can go hang out there sometime.
For sure. Build a badminton court out the back if you can.
Yeah. There's a lot of space in Queensland, yeah.
No worries. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for tuning in. I hope you really enjoyed that story, one which was filled with a lot of different parts to it. So I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. So thanks again for joining in. We'll see you on the next episode. Hey, guys. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the chat, feel free to drop us a rating on Spotify or wherever you listen.
It helps us reach more listeners to help them with their journey. Catch you in the next episode.